Welcome to Documentary First, an inside look at a first-time filmmaker's journey. I'm your host, Josh Lindsay from the Movie Proposal Podcast. And with us is our first-time filmmaker, Christian Taylor.
Hello.
Christian, where are you? This looks like a different room.
It is. I'm in a hotel room in Beaufort, South Carolina.
Oh, very nice. How's the weather in Beaufort?
Oh my goodness, it's raining cats and dogs. I am just sick about it because, of course, the next 2 days after we leave are going to be bright, sunny, and 60. So, and I'll be heading back to the snowy wilds of Chicago. So I'm not very happy about this. But it's been a lovely time here. I did have two lovely days where I was able to be out in the sun and catch a sunrise. And those are on our live feeds. Hopefully people aren't sick of those. But anyway.
And with us, as always, is the awesome Jason Rugg, who's using. Are you using that nice camera again?
Yeah, I am. It's very fancy.
Yeah,
I got it working again.
Good job. We didn't get your hi there.
Hey there.
Hey there. Yeah. All right, you guys. Well, I want to ask you very quickly what's going on with you. Tell me what's going on in your life since we talked to you last.
Jason, go ahead.
I didn't come here prepared for that.
Didn't you read the outline for our show that Bradley so wonderfully crafted? It's in there. You give an update.
It makes sense now. I didn't know that you really wanted to know what was going on with us. I thought you were saying we were going to ask what's going on.
Yeah, it wasn't abundantly clear that it meant us. The J team.
All right, J-Team, I'll give you a second to think about it while I give you a film update. How's that?
Okay.
That'll
sounds
work.
Good.
So, as I told you before, I am in Beaufort, South Carolina with the Beaufort International Film Fest. I'm here with Jacob, my second born son. It is his first film festival, so that's been really neat to expose him to that because he is a cast member in our film. He played a 101st reenactor, and he was also, a PA on set in Normandy. So it's great to have him here. I just have to tell you, this film festival has knocked it out of the park. I have just been really impressed by Beaufort. I strongly recommend filmmakers submit to this film festival. It's run by Ron and Rebecca Tucker. They are an amazing couple that's been doing this about 16 years. Wonderful people. Ron is an ex-Marine. This is right near Parris Island. It's sort of in the South Sea Islands of southern South Carolina. And they just really are passionate about filmmaking, filmmakers, film goers, and they want to make sure it's an excellent experience for everyone. So they've taken the COVID protocols very seriously, and they have set up a whole viewing room that's very socially distanced, and everybody's, their temperatures are taken and masks are required. And so all of that is happening. They have selected about 60 films to be in this film festival. It's Monday through Friday from 9 in the morning until 9:30 at night, and they're showing shorts and features. They have a screenwriting section, so it's impressive how many people have shown up. This has been, I think, the largest number of filmmakers we've had at a film festival, and we are, like I said, nominated for the Duty and Honor category. But honestly, I do not think we have a snowball's chance in hell of winning an award at this festival, quite frankly. And you know what? I am actually okay with that. I just finished watching only half of one of the other Duty and Honor category nominees. It's a film called Bastard's Road, and it is a film about a group of Marines that fought in, it's either Iraq or Afghanistan, that are really battling PTSD pretty severely, and the suicide rates are ridiculous. And so it's about that journey, one soldier's journey. He does a walk across the country and sees other guys in his unit and Gold Star families. And it's very beautifully shot, very moving. And I do feel like there needs to be a highlight on this issue. And so I would be thrilled to lose to Bastard's Road, because I really do think they have an excellent piece of work there that needs to be highlighted. So that's kind of what's been happening with us this week. The film was very well received. We screened on Tuesday to a very full audience, and we received a standing ovation. So that was very humbling.
Wow.
And I was very thankful for that. We've had lots of people come up to us and tell us how moved they were and how much they learned and how their minds were changed about so many things. We did have 2 Normans with us who that was such a treat. They had never seen the film before, but they are very supportive of the American veterans. Virginie Durr being the one that I met first, and she works for Delta and is just really wanting to figure out how we can be on Delta airline flights. And her mom in Normandy is willing to help us. So I'm excited about that French connection. And people were thrilled to hear about their stories. So I feel like we've had a really excellent time here. One of the most fun things I had was the film that was showed right before us was a short called Mend, M-E-N-D. And it was a film by a family, I think it's Pinoski family. I'm not exactly sure how to say their name, but it's either Newski or Pinoski. And it's Jay and Mike and Hannah. Hannah is the daughter. She produced the film. And this film is about a man who has lost his wife and he's dealing with the stages of grief. And she is a Navy captain. And it's just his process of how he moves through that grief and then begins to transform and begin to relate with other people in his community. It's extremely touching. I think it was a wonderful film that was paired well with ours. But during the whole time during the film, I kept going, who is that actor, the lead actor? I'm like, I know him from something. And I mean, I think I knew him from everything. I went and looked at his IMDb credit, and he's one of those working character actors that, I mean, he started in 1984. I don't know if Spaceballs was his first film, but he was in Spaceballs. And all the way up to High Tower, which is filming right now. And, you know, he was Bobby Bowden in We Are Marshall. He was a cop in Remember the Titans. Like all these family films that my family is really, really into, he's watched. He's also been in shows like Roseanne. So he just has this extensive career. And we ended up having lunch with them, and just quite a delightful family. I really, I would love to do something with them sometime. So that's been a real delight, particularly for my son, Jacob, who was a big We Are Marshall, Remember the Titan fan. So
what was the name? I want to look this person up because I feel like I'll recognize them too.
Yes. Oh, you will. And while you could tell us at the end some of the other movies that he's in, it's Mike, and you spell his last name P-N Pinoski. How do you spell that? P-N-I-E-W-S-K-I, Mike Pinoski. And the exciting thing is he's willing to come on our show, and I think we could probably get him on the movie proposal too, which would be, there's a whole host of movies there you can pick from, Josh, for the what is old.
Yeah, awesome. I totally recognize this guy.
Yeah.
It's the thing of like, I couldn't tell you what though.
Right, exactly.
He's been in everything.
Yeah, they said in there that he's this kind of guy where you see him in the airport or you see him somewhere and everyone comes up to him and says, do I know you from church, or do I know you from blah, blah, blah? Like, and nobody can figure it out. And she says, oftentimes he's like, nope, I'm just a pastor. Nope. He's very introverted, I guess. But he's incredibly creative. He wrote the script for Mend. He was the lead actor in Mend. And he's just a very talented guy. He just wrote a new book called Your Screenplay Sucks. So apparently it's just come out. And so, yeah, definitely check those things out for him. I can't wait to get him on the podcast. He's got a lot to teach us. And there were, I think I've made some really great relationships here this week. Another one was Chris White, who did a film called Electric Jesus. It is funny. It is thought-provoking. It sort of pokes a little fun at the Christian subculture in the 80s when all the rock music was kind of getting big in the Christian subculture. and it follows a young Christian, like heavy metal band that's patterning themselves after Stryper. And so, and it stars Kevin from The Office. I don't remember his name, which I'm embarrassed to say, but he's got one of the lead roles in the film. So it's very
Brian Baumgartner.
Okay. It's very well done, and it has a lot of very catchy original music that apparently they got a record deal and they're pressing real albums, and they're coming out like next week or something like that. So Chris said he'd be willing to come on our podcast as well. So we've got some interesting, fun guests coming up pretty soon. Other than that film news, the only other thing is I did get an email from our distribution company that they have signed off on our trailers. And so we're about to sort of press those trailers into action. It's got the Factory Film Studio logo in the front of that. And we're going to make a formal announcement pretty soon because really I've only talked about it here on the podcast, but we're going to make a formal announcement to everyone pretty soon. And they sent us their new redesign of the poster. They have decided to keep our marketing, which is nice. And they just, tweaked it a tiny little bit, and they're making sales on our behalf. Hopefully I'll get an update about that soon. And we still got a few deliverables that we're working on, trying to get our final releases signed and stuff like that. So we're still trying to raise money. We haven't had a lot of donations in the last month. So I'm really trying to figure out some ways to keep our company alive. So that's the news from me.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I thought of something.
Yeah.
I had a colonoscopy this week. That's my update.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you.
I'm doing fine. Everything checks out great. Another 10 years for the next one. So
I'm actually really happy about that. I'm joking around, but I'm super thankful to hear that. I'm glad you got it done early. I hear it's supposed to be done earlier now these days. So if you're out there and you're 45, you might look into to getting that done. Josh, the last time we talked, I'd asked you about the movie proposal, and you said you didn't really know what you guys were doing the next episode, but I have seen the next episode release. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, it was our 100th episode. We the film that was featured was I'm going to mispronounce his name, Derek Delgadio,
I think.
Derek Delgadio's In and of Itself. It's directed by Frank Oz. It's produced by Stephen Colbert and his wife. It's a live, like off Broadway, or maybe it went on Broadway, but I think it started off Broadway, one-man show that involves storytelling and magic and audience participation. And it's not for everybody, but it's definitely worth a discussion. It's touchy-feely. I think Jason and I liked it overall. I think Sky was, I don't know. Did Sky like it?
I don't know if Sky likes anything. His whole thing was, it's just a magic trick. It's just a magic trick. And it's like, yeah, but it was a cool magic trick.
It was a cool magic trick. I had mixed feelings about it, but overall it was very positive. And I think it's on Hulu. And the fact that Frank Oz directed it, Stephen Colbert is involved in it, and it's just something different is a reason to check it out, I think. But we had fun talking about it on the podcast, and talked about a lot of other things too.
The really interesting thing about it is that Frank Oz directed the show itself, like off Broadway. He directed the show, and then he also directed this adaptation of it to screen, which was interesting to see how they took that and they enhanced it with little bits of animation here and there. And they did some things to it that were pretty interesting to see on screen that you couldn't have seen in the theater.
That's awesome. Well, check out In and of Itself, and then go check out the Movie Proposal 100th episode and see if you agree with what they say. By the way, I don't think that we have mentioned this, but Jason is also on that podcast. I don't think we've ever said that before, but
I feel like it's come up that like I'm there. I don't know if it's really that. Yeah, I'm like the sideshow.
You're always the sideshow.
Yeah.
But I would actually like to have you talk a little bit more on my show. So why don't you tell us about what's going on in your creative world?
Okay. Well, let's see. It's actually been a really, really busy last couple weeks because I'm in the process of finishing up an animation project. Actually, two separate animation projects at the same time, and then I have to move on to finish a third animation project. But I'm focusing on two of them right now. So I'm
Are
like,
those yours? Are those your animation projects?
no, they're for other people.
Okay.
It's how I produce the stuff that I want to make.
Sure.
Is working on that stuff. So I'm right in the middle of finishing up three projects simultaneously.
Wow.
And so it's I haven't had much time to do anything else besides that. So that's kind of my update right now.
So, quick question. If anybody wants to hire you to work on their animation projects, are you available for hire?
Yeah. But if they go to Jason Rugg, that's Rugg with 2Gs, .com, there's a contact form. You can reach out to me there.
And I think that's awesome. I mean, Jason is a wonderful person to work with. So if you have any projects you want to, hand out, give him a try for sure.
Well, thank you.
I'm glad that you're busy. We all need paying work and more of it. So kudos to you. Well, we have something special today. One of the things I've really loved having Brad be our new producer of this podcast is that he's really helped us bring on some new guests. And I had somebody reach out to me a while back with a project, and I was super interested in it. And, well, tell us, Josh, what do we got for today?
Okay, well, we have a special guest. Michael, if you want to unmask yourself, we have Michael Peroff, who's the executive producer and co-writer of Behind the Strings, the independent documentary film of the Shanghai Quartet. Michael, thanks for being with us here today.
Good to be here.
Michael has a background. You have a background. Well, you actually not only executive produced, and you're the co-writer of the film, but you've actually co-founded a TV production in China, of all places, right?
Yes.
You develop a weekly primetime programming for China Central TV. Sounds like a lot of different TV in Shanghai and Beijing. You've worked for several global advertising agencies, including Leo Burnett, which we're familiar with, from being from this area. So again, welcome to the show here, and we're excited to talk to you about your film.
Nice to be here.
Yeah, he is a longtime listener, first-time caller. How did you find out about us, Michael?
I started walking. I'm a swimmer, but I started doing swimming and walking. And I said, I'd walk for 40, 50 minutes. And so I decided to try podcasting. And so when I was looking through things that would interest me, I found something on documentary film, which is what I've been doing for over 5 years. So that was the hook. And I started listening and enjoyed it very much and learned a lot. Shared a lot of the problems and hurdles that you and your team have experienced, and just been a listener. So,
well, I don't know how in the world you could learn anything from me, but I mean, you've been doing this far longer than I have, and you have far much more experience than I do, and I feel like you have a lot you could teach us.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think, it's interesting. I'm listening to the Ken Burns Master Class series.
I recommend it.
Okay. So there's a quote that I can't possibly forget. And that is, he says, "You'll never learn more than doing your first documentary." And it's really true because, I had production experience and been involved in production most of my career. They're just the hurdles that come up in documentary film. I mean, number one is raising money. So that's always the biggest hurdle, and you indicated your issues with that. And Ken Burns, as successful as he's been, also feels the same way, that trying to raise money for productions, that he likes to say, when they're looking at a guy who looks like he's 12 years old, he's asking for $5 million, it's a challenge. So, but you learn to deal with it as you have. So
yeah, I mean, I recommend that Ken Burns masterclass constantly on this podcast, just because it was so instrumental to me in getting started and believing that I could do this. I mean, when Ken said that he keeps 2 binders on his desk of all his rejection letters for funding, I'm like, oh my gosh, Ken Burns rejected for funding? Are you kidding me?
yeah.
No.
He says he still gets them. So,
Yeah, it's crazy.
Very interesting. So
You know why? You know why that is? Because films do not make money. I mean, let's just be honest. They just don't. And so now, everybody's wising up, and so they're not forking out the dough thinking they're going to make their money back.
Right. No, it's very true. But it's been a great experience on our end, and we've had our challenges and we've had our pauses in production till we raise more money to go shoot, and then we'd raise more money and go shoot more, and we would fly to France or we'd fly down to Mexico, and then we went to China for 2 weeks. That was our biggest production trip, and followed the quartet on tour in 4 cities. But looking back, it's been very joyful. The story is the key, and that's all we cared about. So,
Josh,
can you give us the elevator pitch for your documentary so we
Yes.
get an idea of what we're talking about here?
and your title, your log line, and your synopsis. Why don't you lay those on us?
Okay. The title of our film is Behind the Strings. It's about a classical string quartet that have been performing for 36 years professionally. They originally came out of China, but the 3 principals that are in the film have been citizens for 25, 30 years. So they're really more U.S. than they are China. But we wanted to capture a 3-dimensional view of this very interesting quartet. And really, you got to put aside the music they play. As beautiful as it is, it's an acquired taste. Because the film is really how these guys strived over time and worked very hard, got discovered early, and were nurtured by some of the leading musicians within that field in the U.S. When they first came here, which was like in the mid-'80s. And we wanted to film how they got there to the top of what they do, but we also wanted to get the family story, because they have full-time jobs teaching at a major state university in a conservatory. But on top of that, they travel 180 days a year all over the world to perform and to teach. Heavily Europe. Recently, they weren't always performing in China that much. They would go to Shanghai and Beijing. But one of the things we stumbled upon in doing our documentary was a change in their performance schedule. When we began filming them, they were only going a couple times a year to Shanghai and Beijing. And then in about year 3, we began to notice they were always going to China. So we asked, what's going on? They said, well, we're being booked in the secondary cities throughout China. And this relates to what's happened in China in terms of the money that the country's gotten very wealthy. And they've built magnificent performance venues in most of the cities, the secondary cities. A secondary city could have 5 to 10 million people in it. And they perform there and also do teaching. But it's a change. And it really is. We picked up a sub-narrative about how China is changing in terms of music. Even when I was there, I had no idea that Western classical music was anything that was being performed there. If anything, I was most surprised when I worked in China. I'd be in Shanghai many times, and I like jazz. And I would go to this very well-known jazz at the Peace Hotel, right on the Bund, which is the river. On the roof, they have a rooftop garden, and this jazz group performs and has since the 1930s. Not the same performers, obviously. So, that was kind of interesting, but I knew nothing about classical string quartet music. And that was an accident, because back here, many years later, when I stopped working in China, I saw something in the local newspaper that said the Shanghai Quartet's going to perform this weekend. I said, oh, I like Shanghai jazz, assuming it was going to be jazz. And I went and I didn't look at the program. I, got in my seat and I opened the program, and it's all about Beethoven, Mendelssohn, and Mozart. And I said, well, that's a switch. So that was my first exposure to the music, and I found it interesting. What happened later was, and I had no idea they taught at that university or anything like that, but my wife became friends with one of the musicians' wives. And she always used to say, we have to get together because your husband worked in China and he knows Shanghai and Beijing and all the other cities. But it took a year and a half to do that because they were always traveling. Finally, we got together and I began to see a different view of the Shanghai Quartet. I went to their performances, but then I would go back to their house. They'd always have a little group coming back. And I got to know the rest of the quartet. And I said, this is an interesting story. And it resonated with a lot of things that I knew about China, particularly the Cultural Revolution, which happened from 66 to 76 when Mao Zedong was in power. And he banned, and really his wife, but both of them, they banned anything Western. And Western music was part of that. And the two founding brothers, Wei Gong and Hong Gong Li, who were in the film, their family suffered. The conservatories were closed. Their parents were, the quartet that's playing now, the two founding brothers are third generation classical musicians. But you could get in big trouble for performing Beethoven during that period. And so when they would tell me their family story, it resonated with what I knew about the Cultural Revolution. I kept saying, there's a story here, there's a story. And I was at a point in my life, I was planning to do a number of documentaries that I had in my head. And this one was top of the list. First of all, I thought this will be easy. They live in the same town where they teachers in the same town. This is going to be easy. I can knock this off pretty quick. And I partnered with a documentary. Well, he's a corporate filmmaker, but also he does documentaries, and he's a cinematographer as well as a director. And so we did a preliminary interview. We pitched them, and they said, okay. And we would have full creative control, which is an important thing. This is not a pitch film. You see things that happen. And one of the most interesting things that happen, and it's very cinematic, is the way they get to their really greatest music is by negotiating with each other how a piece should be performed. And that I put negotiation in quotes because it's really arguments. Harsh arguments sometimes.
Yeah, I noticed that. My first question was, I understand they argue to get to the heart of the good art, but I also wondered, do they like each other?
I thought the exact same thing.
Okay, that's a good question. First of all, which comes out, hopefully in the film, is they certainly professionally admire each other. And that's what's important, the professionalism. But not unusual to this group of or category of musicians, quartet musicians. They lead very separate and private lives from each other. Now, the two brothers, it's a little bit different, but they purposely do not want to socialize. And when they travel, we had a hotel scene checking in at the hotel while they were in tour in New England. And one of them says, I want to be in a room not near the other three, and they do that in every hotel. And when they're asked to come to a party that's related to a performance, they're together, they're very sociable, but they really don't have a whole lot of involvement in each other's lives. And they need that separation. And part of it is driven back to the key point of these arguments sometimes are really tough. And we just released, I think the version you saw, the 75-minute piece, which we put back a section, which the arguments are still there. But we interviewed when we were in Taos 3 years ago. We were filming and they were rehearsing in someone's apartment, and they were arguing about something. And I said, what are they arguing about? They just performed this last weekend. It should be down pat. So that afternoon, we had an interview with Nick, the One American, which is interesting to viewers to see someone who comes from Spanish Harlem in New York City with these three Chinese American guys. So Nick said, and I think it's true of all art, it's not only music. He said, if we don't keep reaching to be better, we then will fall back. We have to always keep trying to be better. And that's typically what their argument's about, although they don't say that. It's very interesting. One time I walked into their studio and they were listening to a CD of a performance and making comments about it. That should have been that way. And then one of them said to me afterwards, he said, it's a whole lot easier to have the discussion of this when it's a CD and we're not rehearsing it and arguing with each other. So, but it was a fascinating thing for us to experience and to capture in the film. And, so I told this story to someone and they said, quarterback, former Boston.
Tom Brady.
Tom Brady. He makes the same point. He says, I don't want to be the best of everyone. I want to be my best. And I think it really goes into all endeavors, if you're really serious about what you're doing. So
yeah, well, you did a lovely job with this film. I actually do like classical music, and I did know about the quartets. I had even heard of the Shanghai Quartet. Of course, I didn't know any of the behind the scenes stories, but I found it all very interesting and a compelling story. I do think it's nice that you brought in sort of the family perspective, because it's almost like a military family where the wives are left tending to the children and experience a lot of loneliness and hardship because they can't count on their husbands. There's not a lot of work-life balance for all of those guys, but I think you did a lovely job telling their story. My question is, my business son, Hunter, who sadly is no longer with us because he's going to fly jets for the Navy. He basically says to me, Christian, you have to think of your end audience. Who are you? Who is the audience that's going to be buying this, and what do they want? And are you going to be able to sell this? So I guess that's my question to you. It is clearly a niche, film. What do you hope will happen with this? And are things going as you had hoped?
Yes, it's happening. We're a little bit behind your film's trajectory right now. We're still in the middle of film festivals. In fact, one starts tonight, the Beloit International Film Festival, which will be shown, and they're going to do a Q&A in the middle of the week. So we're getting film festival pickup. Then with distribution, we're about to consider, do we go with a distributor, assuming they'll take us? But there are, within the film industry, we found there are, there's segments that this film would appeal to. There are people that specialize in art before COVID, art film houses. But we still haven't figured out our distribution deal. We know in terms of target audience, it is clearly chamber music audiences. They are passionate about the music. We see that. We've gone to so many concerts and festivals. They're just passionate. And we think that we need to satisfy them. And we've had a screening or two with that audience in different places and gotten pretty good feedback. And then I think it'll band out to classical music. And I think it'll begin to hopefully get a buzz. It's not unusual that, a couple, one may like this kind of music and the other one just likes jazz. And I know a lot of couples like that. So what I found is that we attract one and then the other one kind of rides along just to see it. And all of a sudden they become interested. It's our film's really a human interest story. There's performance, but it's not a performance film. And we did that by design. There was a film done 32 years ago about the Shanghai Quartet. And they had much more music. Towards the end of the movie, it's 11 minutes of a piece. And we decided that in this day and age, the audience didn't need to have that. We could still satisfy most of the chamber music people. And I think most of our music pieces are 2 minutes or 2 minutes or less. So we hopefully balance that enough to then expand our audience. And but there are other, there's lots of segments of this audience. There's the whole teaching community, which is large and diverse and highly segmentable, which we're looking at right now. There are conferences for violin. There's a huge conference coming up next month for violin teachers all over the United States. And it's a huge conference. It'll be virtual, but it was a large in-person kind of thing. So that's how we see our target audience. We're not a romantic comedy. We're not an action film. We cross those off the list, but we think we'll buffer into some other areas that are beyond just chamber music audiences. So,
excellent. So, Josh, Jason, I want to give you guys time to ask questions.
So, had you ever made a film before? You have production background. But have you made and I don't know, is this a feature-length film? I think you said 75 minutes?
Yes, 75. The one we released this week, 75 minutes.
So is this your first, what you call film?
Yeah, in the traditional sense, yes. My company that I co-founded in China with Chinese National and a couple other people, we were doing production, weekly primetime shows, which were international shows, overseas Chinese, that we would do this all over the world and then bring it back, edit, and be on the network and a couple of municipal stations. But, that was, I wasn't a line producer in that. I was the CEO of the company with this one Chinese national. And then when I was in the agencies, it was really commercial production. And again, I was in account management and not in creative or even in the production department, but I still had it. But it's clearly my first. And, I was able to borrow a lot of skill sets that I had into this project, but I still had to learn a lot more. So
what surprised you the most about making a film versus past projects?
I'm sorry, making a film that what?
What surprised you the most? Like, did you go in thinking, well, I've got enough experience. I think I've got these skill sets down. Was there something that caught you off guard, something that surprised you? You thought, well, this is a lot harder than I thought it was going to be.
I would say the thing that comes to mind right off the top of my head was go back to raising the money. I figured I was an account. I was a trained account guy. I worked on many categories of business and have had to make pitches for budgets or things like that and explain why it was good. So I said, this is a no-brainer for me, and I had a much larger budget in mind, I might add. So we didn't get that. I don't think anybody does. So that was probably the biggest surprise. We had other issues that popped up in production, but you somehow just become resilient, and you just march on. And you don't always succeed, but you then march around. And sometimes you got to march down in order to get up. So that it just comes with the territory. So
yeah.
Does that sound familiar?
Yes, sounds very familiar. And thank you, Ken Burns, for saying just keep marching. You just got to keep going. You can't quit.
Exactly.
Just quit.
Exactly. See, I didn't look at the Ken Burns thing until really 90% was done. I mean, not 90. We still have, we're out of post. We were out of post when I began to look at the series, and I said, "Man, is he right?" So many times. So.
What advice would you give, just having made your first film and having the production experience you've had? What are a couple of pieces of advice you would give a first-time filmmaker?
I'd say if you're not a persistent person or can't get that skill set to see beyond the failure. I mean, first of all, you have to love the project. I mean, love the idea of what the film is about, and believe that there is an audience for it. And once you have that set inside of you, that will tune you up heavily for that persistence part. And I say that's the most important, the biggest thing. So.
Jason, you got any questions?
Yeah, I'm curious. I know with Christian's documentary, there was a lot of writing that had to be done for figuring out, what does the voiceover look like and how do we tell this story? So I'm curious, we mentioned at the top that you were a co-writer on this film,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So what does that role look like for a documentary like this?
Well, it's not like writing term papers or things in English class in school. It's more thinking about how we weave the story together. And I had a rough idea of what the components were going to be. And my partner Hal Rifkin and I spent a lot of time as we learned more before we began actually doing production. It was pre-production. As we began to learn more and sorting out what we thought the important things and who do we want to talk to and what are the stories that we'd like to get. We may not get them. We accepted the fact there's some things that we just may not be able to get for whatever reason, but that we knew we had about 12, 13 narrative braids, if you will, or strands that we wanted to braid together. So that was the first part of the writing, of thinking it through the stories. There wasn't any one narrative that would really justify the film by itself, but we needed to bring things that related, and so that was part of it. The other part was initially we thought we were in our early trailer development. We had some production done, and we did some trailer, and we thought we may want to have a narrator. So we went online and we looked for voiceovers. And we can't, it's really great. I mean, what's happened over the past 5 years from a producer's point of view who wants to get this, you don't have to go to a traditional studio and they find the people and all that's gone. Everybody's got a little studio in their closet that's in voiceover, right? So we got some voices and we did readings of that and we wrote some copy, which is all gone. I mean, it's ancient history. We realized that really was not going to help our film. It was in a trailer, but we got rid of that. So the writing then went in another area. We did many more interviews of people than are in the film. And some of them were good, but you can't fit them all in. And once we had our threads, and I have to tell you, Tan Dun, the Chinese composer who did the music got an Oscar for Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and the 2008 Beijing Olympics music. He was a fabulous interview. Hard to get. Took us 2.5 years to get him because he's so busy and booked. But he would just go on, and it was like poetry to our ears. I mean, it didn't totally relate to our film, but his vision of the world was just this extraordinary presentation. Well, we had to, fortunately, we had a very good editor. I should mention her in this, Tracy Kring, who's just a superb editor. And, she never heard of Tan Dun. She did a lot of Wikipedia research on it. She fell in love with him. And she kept saying, I love this guy. I love this guy. And so I expect we would see a lot of his stuff surfacing in the edits. Well, she sliced it down to the core, where it really fit whatever was happening in the prior couple of scenes. And so, that was a process of writing. So the writing would be, I would do the questions and the order of the questions, which was very important. And Hal, the director, cinematographer, he would look at it. He may add something, but there was a lot of time in developing the questions so that we had confidence that we would get dramatic material. And I'll give you one little quick example. There's a very famous colleague, well, you saw him in the film, Long Yu. or Yulong. I mean, he's the Chinese last names usually go first, which would be Yulong.
I noticed like
a couple times, people are referring to him as Yulong, and then his title is saying Long Yu. Anyway,
yes.
So he was a childhood friend of the brothers. They grew up, and their families were all working for the Chinese Symphony and the Shanghai Symphony and the orchestra and the conservatory. So he's a very famous conductor, and he's a guest conductor at Lincoln Center every year for the Chinese New Year program. And he was really a character we wanted to get, and he also took a couple of years to get. So I had this picture of him and Weigon, the younger brother, in their Mao suits when they were 12 years old in a park. And I'd never met him, and I'd heard about him, but I wanted to get into the story of the Cultural Revolution and music, but I didn't start there. And I had to think through how I bring this conversation into a warm, trusting point where I can pop a difficult question. Anyway, so I had the picture and I was going to show it to him, but I didn't want to show it to him until the last 5 minutes of the interview, because I said, what if he just gets angry and walks out? So I saved it to the end, and it turns out when I showed him the photo, he broke up laughing. He said, yeah, that's Weigon and I. We were playing hooky from school that day. Someone took our picture in the park, but it's really cute with their mouse suits. But it's not in the film. There are some other mouse suits, but anyway. So that was a part of the writing that was much more subtle and not traditional writing, particularly for dramatic feature. I would say, in fact, now that I'm talking about, I think the developing of the braid, and then also the interview sheets with the questions were the two major writing things. So, long answer to short question.
So I have another question. I don't know that you've mentioned this yet. The four guys in your film, was it difficult to convince them to do this, or did they reach out to you first? How did all of that happen? Because it looks like you have complete access to their lives, their concerts, behind the scenes, their fighting. What was their feeling about this whole thing?
It was a mix. I think first there was a little bit of caution. Weigon says in one of the Q&As in one of the film festivals, he says, why would they want to interview us? We're not important. I mean, why would they want to do a film about us? I mean, he's a very modest guy. In fact, they all are, all four, very modest. And so they couldn't figure it out. And then when we told them the ideas that we had, they said, okay. I mean, I think from their perspective, they saw this, even though we have full creative control, that this was ultimately a nice promotional piece for them. Not that they needed much promotion. And they agreed. But it's interesting, you raised the arguments. It was not, the first 6 months, they were just nice guys in all the rehearsals, everybody's happy, and very little argument. But, we were a fly on the wall. They got to know us, and they finally got comfortable, and they just didn't pay attention to it. We were just flies on the wall, and they got very relaxed, and we got some great, those scenes. And again, I go back to Tracy, our editor. She did we think, selfishly, a magnificent job of weaving those arguments as little segments, but then also at certain places in the film coming back to it. So that's how it worked. Now I don't know. They all screened it before when we finished. We haven't done a final lock, but they all screened it, and they all said in varying degrees, yeah, good job. They liked it because. I think they looked at things selectively. They saw their performance. They seemed to do well seeing the arguments. So, it was great. Worked out. We're very happy with their response.
Michael, where can we, if someone's interested in learning more about the film, where can they go?
I'm sorry?
If someone wants to learn more about the film Behind the Strings, where can they go?
A Facebook page. We're redoing our website as we speak. They could also go for, as I mentioned, the Beloit International Film Festival in Wisconsin is up right now. And you don't have to, purchase the film to get information. You can see it. Their website's got, different pieces of copy. So those are the two places. YouTube, there are, I think, 4 or 5 Q&As from other film festivals that have been done. That's where it is right now. But if they go on Facebook, it's facebook.com/ behind the strings, all one word. That's there. And so that's where they can see it.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on, and I really want to encourage you and congratulate you. Thank you so much for listening to our podcast and for sharing your film with our audience. We really do wish you the best.
Thank you very much. My pleasure. Nice meeting all of you.
You too.
Likewise. And Michael, good luck to you in the film. And for everyone listening, thank you for listening to Documentary First, where we believe everyone has a story to tell and you can be the one to tell it.
Bye, everybody.